Good evening. After a rough financial year occasioned by COVID-19 pandemic, the government last week assessed its own performance and the results were dire. Of 22 million anticipated COVID-19 vaccinations, only 1.6 million jabs had been administered, leaving the country at the massive lockdowns and nighttime curfew. Local governments, which are the key drivers of government activities, managed only 34.6% of the activities they had planned. The economy took a battering, with growth slowing down immensely and many SMEs that employ many Ugandans folding. It also remains most unclear whether the 15 million children will be going back to school soon. On the show, we ask, is the government in charge? Tonight on the spot, we host the spokesperson of the NRM party, the Honorable Emmanuel Dombo, and the Honorable Semuju Ibrahim Uganda, who speaks for the opposition FDC party. Gentlemen, thank you so much for having honored our invitation. I must tell you, Ugandans are waiting. The spotlight is on you, Honorable Emmanuel Dombo and Honorable Ibrahim Semuju Uganda. A warm welcome to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Let me begin with you, Mr. Emmanuel Dombo, because you speak for the party that is in power. We are still battling the pandemic. The economy is shattered in a way, but I know you tried as much as possible as government to go and borrow money so that can help people during this COVID thing. If you are borrowing in our name, but not investing for us, I'm saying investing for us because if you had borrowed the money, then you should have put it in hospitals. If you borrowed the money, then we should have had oxygen. If you borrowed the money, then we shouldn't be having only 1.6 million vaccinations. If you had borrowed the money to help in the pandemic, by now we wouldn't be where we are. How can you heavily borrow and don't help the people in whose name you're borrowing?
Well, I don't know what the source of your information is. I know there have been a lot of leakages in government, and this is a fact that is acknowledged by the Auditor General's office and the other civil society organizations that monitor government expenditure, and that partially affects our performance as a country. But I want to tell you that in order government to borrow, it qualifies to borrow and shows that its creditworthiness. That's the first one. The second one is that it has tried as much as possible to spend the borrowed money on the productive sector, one of the biggest areas being infrastructure. We have borrowed money and put on the roads, oil roads, and a number of roads in the country. We have borrowed money and put on the rehabilitation of dams and construction of new dams for a source of energy. We have also borrowed money to put in other sectors like health.
Honorable Dombo, I'm actually talking about the borrowing for a specific reason of helping Ugandans in the pandemic.
Yes, we have borrowed.
And I haven't seen that money being utilized specifically in those areas.
No, it has. When you get to the health sector, we have had problems perhaps in the procurement sector, but we have had a lot of money that has been invested in the rehabilitation of the health infrastructure in the country. Some of it is not as productive as it should have been, but when you get to the hospitals that have been constructed, when you get to the beds and the ICU units that have been constructed or procured, although some have not been installed, either because of capacity problems or because of corruption tendencies, because of buying things that are not working.
There are things that we are seeing that should be looked at as a matter of urgency. For example, oxygen. For example, things like vaccination. Why would we be having only 1.6 jabs now, yet we know vaccines is an important way of getting out of the pandemic, and yet we borrowed a lot of money specifically for that?
I think vaccines, the problem is bigger than what you'd think.
So what is it?
Because when you look at the sources of vaccines that we have so far we all have in the country, you'd find that government is struggling. First of all, Uganda is a very small market that it cannot influence procurement of vaccines by itself. Not many countries have performed as good. Some have performed better than us, but we are far much better than many countries within the community. But through the African arrangement, I know that many African countries have come together, and Uganda is one of them that are procuring vaccines through the AU arrangement. And hopefully by the end of this year, most likely by the end of the financial year, government predicts that perhaps over 22 million people by then will have been vaccinated. And that will then enable the country to open up the economy fully. And also, when the donors keep giving us what we ought to have gotten or what we should get under the various COVAX arrangements, we believe that the economy may progressively open up so that Uganda rebounds to the productive sector. But right now, the economy, you know, it collapsed. The GDP growth collapsed from about 6.4% before the pandemic levels to what it is now, about 3.4%, which is the current. And this has affected so many areas within the economy. There
is a lesson that you should have learned as government, because when Corona hit us, it sort of gave us an equalizer. Whether it's Honorable Emmanuel Dombo, or Honorable Semuju Nganda, myself, or whoever, we are all at the same level. It doesn't matter whether you're a minister or a peasant, because you cannot travel out to go and get, you know, help in India or South Africa. All of us are here. Have you taken trouble to realize that because Corona has exposed the weakness and how broken the system is, so that you can fix it?
It's not only that. That is true. Corona has almost been an equalizer. But it has also been an eye-opener, because we have been relying a lot on imports of the things that we have been using. But because we are no longer importing as much, it has created an opportunity for those people with either capital for investment or who are entrepreneurial in nature to exploit the opportunities that Corona itself is creating within the country. If utilized, that one can help us to revamp the economy of our country. The second one, the other major problem it has created, is that in the entire African continent, there is not a single country amongst all these major countries that can produce a vaccine for human consumption or for prevention of disease. I got so surprised that smaller countries like Cuba and other smaller nations could be able to manufacture vaccines which the entire African continent is not producing. And this is something that has exposed African governments to the extent that you just cannot know what it creates an opportunity. If governments can come together and muscle their capital together and their intellectual property in order to begin manufacturing what can protect their people.
Before I bring in the Honorable Semuju Nganda, if you have taxed the people heavily and you have borrowed for them in their name so much, and yet you cannot fix the very things, basics for them, really, you have lost legitimacy to even lead.
That is an opinion which you may have, but when you look at the way government...
What's the function of government? What's the government of the state and government?
Look at the
basic needs of people, health, education, things like those, security.
Absolutely, look at the security.
But on those parameters, if you are failing really, then you have lost the legitimacy even to lead.
Unless that's what you want to conclude, but look at Uganda and see, why would they choose to bring here people from Afghanistan to provide them security? Because Uganda is an island that can provide the security that is being guaranteed. The second one... The
people of Masaka listening to you and they can't even understand where you stay.
No, but you know that government has gotten over that problem.
After 32 bodies?
Absolutely. Because in America, the other time when there was a sniper, how many people were killed? And how many people get killed in America?
We are Ugandans and we deserve better.
Do you think that America is any less?
We are Ugandans and we deserve better.
Absolutely, we are going to do better. But we can only do that if all of us are focused in doing the same thing and achieving it.
Let me bring in Honorable Semuju Nganda. So, Honorable Semuju, as a member of parliament, your job is also to appropriate funds. They bring in their proposition, they want loans, and then you give them. It's as if their job is, to get loans. Sometimes we have no even ability to pay, or even we're not ready to fix the needs. Then why do you pass those loans?
Part of what has killed the debate and discussion in Uganda, I don't know whether it's the way the debate itself is framed. Even matters where we should agree and find a solution together. If you put the question like you put to a government spokesperson, he thinks he's in the dock that must defend himself. This week, government had a retreat to assess its performance. They even have an annual performance report by government. They were, initially it was supposed to be President's office, this building near Parliament. That report was presented. There are several other reports that, but I'll pick the one of Dr. Ezra Suruma. Dr. Ezra Suruma had something I didn't know until this week called the Prime Minister's Delivery Unit. And he made a presentation, and I want to do the Honorable Dombo to that presentation, in which he made a summary of the situation as it is in the country. First, he said our target as a country was middle income. He said Tanzania and Kenya achieved it, Uganda hasn't. Dr. Suruma said only 30% Ugandans who go to hospital are the ones who are satisfied. Only 30%. He said 16%, only 16% of community access roads are motorable. And 50% of UPE pupil, 50% are not, they are not able to pass the numeracy tests after 6 years in school. I started there to invite the Honorable Dombo not to feel a sense of responsibility that where we have failed, and he appears on TV, that the solution is to say everything is okay. I want to invite him, my elder, and I know his capacity. Was one of the best MPs in Parliament. And that's where we've lost it as a country. And you, the media, you're putting a lot of pressure. Now you're asking us, why do we? Today, the Minister of Finance made a presentation to the Committee on the Budget, and a member of that committee presented a fiscal charter as the public finance management. The fiscal charter is your government, it's a 5-year program. Government will set objectives, and they fall within the debate that we have here. On matters of health, if you read the government annual performance report, the government does not speak like its spokesperson. They admit failure and then commit themselves to go and deal with those failures. One of the things I've seen there, they blame, because they did not meet the targets of government in all sectors. But specifically the one of health that we're addressing now, they blame absenteeism, that medical workers are not there. I don't know whether they will need to get LDUs to beat them to stay there, because the facilitation of medical doctors and of medical workers in itself hasn't improved. Even where they have made commitments, they are not. So we continue passing. The question you have asked me of Parliament continuing to pass the money even when they are glaring failures. The donors, people who give Uganda money, and all the other poor countries have faced a similar question. If money is stolen, do you continue giving or you don't? And the answer is very simple. The ones who are stealing money, even when you stop giving the money, they will take. So the impact is going to be felt by the ordinary people. So you'd rather continue, they steal a big percentage, and then the 20% will go to the
But when you keep doing that,
so
Honorable Samujo,
yes.
when you keep doing that, as Parliament, you know, appropriating whatever they have, their wish list, and you just give it a green light.
See,
you kind of mortgage our future. And that will come to affect you.
The trouble with Parliament,
our children.
with the exception of South Africa, who have gone to court and a decision has been made by a court that parliamentary decisions are not advisory. In Uganda, until that matter is decided by a court, the decisions of Parliament are advisory in Uganda, with the exception of laws. But most of the decisions are advisory. You can pass them and they say thank you very much and then do to the contrary. But even when you'll excuse me, I want to illustrate this with a point. One time I had colleagues on a committee of Parliament who went to Ruera because of sand mining. They arrested the people and brought them. And I asked myself, why did they arrest them? You have no prison where to keep them. You cannot prosecute them. So they brought them out to Parliament, and after 30 minutes they had let them go. So the limitation is, with the legislature is that you will pass the money, but even when you discover, after reading the Auditor General's report, that this particular money has been stolen, this, and this, you can only make a recommendation to the same people to go and
But I remember, Ibrahim, the same Parliament where you sit, when the doctors and the medical officers were clamoring for more pay. There's a time when you halted passing of the budget because you wanted money to be increased in the health sector, and it was done.
It was not. In the 9th Parliament, we actually reallocated money because under the Public Finance Management Act, Parliament has powers to reallocate funds to move them at least a particular percentage. So the agreement, including with NRM MPs, was that we are going to increase the pay of medical workers by 46, if I'm not mistaken, billion shilling. Of course, eventually the NRM MPs were summoned by the president. They went to this place in Chivoga Chankwanzi. They came back when they had changed. But even if you do all those things, you will not go to release the money. They can release, they can. So we are like a hump. A hump does not stop someone from overspeeding. It can only inconvenience him. The people will come flying over a hump. So we are just a hump in the process. The power, where I agree with you and we take blame collectively as a Parliament, even the little that we have is abused by ourselves. We don't assert ourselves as we should. I think if we did, where I agree with you, maybe things will be better than what they are now. There I agree with you that even the little that we should be able to do sometimes don't do it, because you have people of the new Dombo mentality, that everything to do with the government you must defend. Even where there are glaring figures, you must defend that the performance is very good in every sector. So therefore, yes, I agree. Maybe we need to keep revising, but there are limitations within the law. There are things you can't do.
We have seen our neighbors in Kenya, when the government decided to borrow money, I think from the IMF or World Bank, and everybody came up in arms and said, you know what, not in our name. And they really said, you are not going to give this government money, this loan, because it's going to be misused. The previous money you've given them, we don't know how they have even invested it, where they have invested it. This time around, not in our name. Emmanuel Dombo, you are likely to push Ugandans to reach that level where they will be on the street telling you not to borrow, not in their name. Because if you have borrowed in their name and they have not invested for them, then really, there's them and you.
What is true is that there's been some reckless conduct within the Ministry of Finance on the way they have been borrowing. When you read the loan performance, there are many loans that have been procured and approved by Parliament, and over the years they have not performed and we have continued to pay interest. Some, the projects have even come to the end without the money being disbursed. Those are problems of management, I think. The second one is how are loans procured?
If there is a problem of management, I'm sorry to disrupt. If there's a problem of management, you have borrowed money you're more or less mortgaging my future. You're going to ask for more money. Somebody should take political responsibility and pay, because you have a responsibility to supervise.
I think government realized progressively that there has been a mismanagement in some of those areas, and they had to create a loan approval system within cabinet, that in order for government to borrow, all loans must be approved by a subcommittee of cabinet in order to keep track on what was happening. Before the introduction of that subcommittee, any head of department would initiate a loan, conspire with the Minister of Finance, and before you know it, they would even compromise at times the members of parliament who would be on the National Economic Committee, approving all the loans without going to supervise what the loans are going to do, how the loans have been initiated. And there has been a problem combined both in parliament, sourcing of the loans, and could be some of them are motivated by corruption. But since government or cabinet introduced the subcommittee of cabinet in order to oversee and evaluate all the loans at cabinet level before they come to the floor of parliament, I think there has been some bit of curtailing on the abuse that used to happen at that time. The only problem that has happened now is that the economy has contracted. And when you look at the tax collection, our tax collections have really gone down. The aggregate demand has gone down. Many enterprises have been folding up and losing income. And this has generally forced government to borrow in order to be able to fund the activities that ordinarily they would have funded using the tax collections, which unfortunately didn't come realize.
You know, like the money that the government has borrowed, it appears like you have not borrowed because there's a need for it. It appears you have borrowed because you have lenders. Because if there was a need and you have borrowed the money, then you utilize it effectively for that particular need.
Some of the loans that has happened, when you look at the loans where they have borrowed the money for the construction of dams, for the construction of roads, especially in the oil sector, and a number of roads. When you look at the seed schools, the construction of the schools, and you look at some of the hospitals that have been rehabilitated. But there are some funny projects under the Ministry of Finance where government has been borrowing, and much of the money is spent on capacity building without addressing the real productive sectors of the economy.
But
this has exacerbated the problem of excessive borrowing, and it has forced the government to borrow beyond the threshold. Because I listened to the Minister of Finance during the budget conference in Kololo, and he was saying that because of the performance of the economy, government has been forced to borrow beyond the threshold, although the indicators are that the economy is going to rebound and government is going to go back to the norm. But there has been a challenge on the management of the loans where government has been borrowing without spending the money which it has borrowed.
I like the honesty in the words of the Honorable Emmanuel Dombo. So how do we ensure that those funny projects that are within the ministry is talking about, which are hemorrhaging public resources that have been borrowed, do not continue? Because it appears there are some good men like him who stand by and watch and let it happen, and they know it.
Where I disagree, and I'm not in any way defending the Minister of Finance, but I disagree with the Honorable Dombo that Minister of Finance is necessarily the problem. I have read their own reports, because you see the Minister of Finance is the conduit. They are the ones who present a request to borrow to Parliament. They are the ministry that brings, but they do so on behalf of many
agencies and ministries.
Many agencies. Many years, including the whole of last year, the President kept blaming Parliament for delaying government programs. I have read a report by Minister of Finance. For example, we've borrowed sometimes for roads whose designs are not there. Sometimes we borrow money because it has been made available by the World Bank through its various programs, by the Islamic Development Bank. And then after borrowing, we go to design roads. And that process of designing, sometimes the acquisition of land will take you more than 2 or 3 years, but you begin paying interest. Because if you look at our budget now, loan repayment is now item number 1, almost coming to about 4 to 5 trillion shilling. If you look at the
structure of the budget.
Yes. So we spend more money on repaying loans, but the interest itself is also more than 1 trillion, because most of the borrowing that we are doing actually is not borrowing from outside, it's borrowing from local commercial banks. And borrowing from commercial banks has 2 disadvantages. The money is very expensive, but 2, you are also competing with the private sector who should be growing your own economy. Because banks like lending to government, because government will never default. And in every year now, in each financial year's budget, you have about 7 trillion shilling, which will go towards loan repayment, mostly domestic. And the interest is high because, as I said, you're borrowing from commercial banks. But the problem is not just one sector. If you look at the annual performance report of government, every sector is failing. In fact, Dr. Ezra Suruma, in his conclusion, said there is a need for soul searching at all levels. That was his presentation. Because all the targets that are set and are supposed to be aligned to the National Development Program, all the targets that were set by government in all sectors were never achieved. Some cases the performance was below 30%, yet the money was passed. So therefore the failure is not necessarily the failure of the Minister of Finance, it's a structural failure. I keep saying these things and they look so simple. Because do you have the right set of human resource? And for me, my yardstick is very simple. Anyone who cannot get a job on the job market in the private sector has no space in the government. Look at the supervisors. I've been joking about 3 senior leaders in parliament. One of them is dead, another one left. But I keep talking about them, that you're assembling a set of human resource deliver on set objectives. And you start with the supervisors. I keep telling the constituents. The president himself now is aged. Today he said the reason he's 77, that he doesn't take alcohol. And I don't know what other thing he said. These days he has a birthday, the day assigned to him by his children. So you have a 77-year-old president. Of course, now you have a bit of younger people. By that time, you had his contemporary, the Honorable Sekandi. Then you had the Honorable Gunda. All those are his contemporaries. And their deputies were Kive Jinja and Moses Sari. And I said, so these are the CEOs of Uganda that are supposed to deliver to you.
That was his story.
But even when you have young people, do you have because look, and with due respect, you have a man like Dr. Ezra Suruma, who are his supervisors, because he heads a delivery unit under the office of the Prime Minister. So the moment you don't have a competent set of human resource, it will become a miracle in the world that we are the only country where you don't value competence and then you think they are performance. So it goes without, because look, on all the set targets aligned to the NDP, whether in health, government did not perform. That's when they locked themselves under that, I don't know whether it's a boardroom, under the Prime Minister's tower, this one, not very far from where we are. The things that Dombo is saying here, they did not say them there. They said, we have failed. What do we do? If you look at the education sector, the dropout is high. The literacy, in numeracy and literacy, more than 50%, the performance is very bad. The roads are not motorable. But when they come here, they will throw the figures of tarmac road is done in your face and then tell you, this has never happened, and as if everybody moves on a tarmac road. Only 16% of community access roads, by their own report, are motorable.
Okay.
30% of the patients who go to seek medical care are satisfied, 30%. And these are figures in the annual government performance report. And their verdict is that we do not perform. In my own view, why didn't they? They don't have the right set of human resource. They simply pick people to reward them either because of the regions they represent or because of their relationship with those who are in power. And therefore the solution, and that's why I want us to have a discussion, maybe it may not have to be televised. We will need to recruit the right people. I've worked in the same companies with you before. When I went to work at Monta, I did not have a relative there. Nobody took me there. I simply went there and proved, and they gave me a job. And so you were, and many others. But you can't have a government that go fishing for people who cannot be employed by anyone, and they're the ones who are running affairs of 40 million people, and then you think a miracle will happen. Okay. So we need to set up, we need to have the right people, but also supervision. Because if government begins blaming itself, performance in hospitals is very bad because of absenteeism. Performance in schools is very bad because of absenteeism. What has happened? In a primary school where I went, there were inspectors of school. The way we are cleaning the schools, and they are not based from Kampala. When you have an inspector visiting a school, but there was time, a report was brought to Parliament and Honorable Dombo was there when there were schools on Kampala Road, and they were releasing money every year to go and fund UPE schools on Kampala Road.
Okay, Honorable Ibrahim. I think before we take a break quickly, I think I should read for you, Honorable Emmanuel Dombo, because I have a text that has come from the Honorable, I don't know whether I should say, yeah, but the Honorable Amanya Mushega. He says, you don't borrow because they are lenders. You borrow because there's absolute need and you can't do otherwise. And also, you have the ability to pay. Always try to live within your means.
Honorable Amanya Mushega is, he has been in government. He knows why, even when he was in government, they used to borrow the way they were borrowing. We have a fundamental problem. The first one is that domestic borrowing is done because government cannot meet the budgeted expenditure, even when they are consumptive, including payment of salaries. Most of the domestic borrowing goes on supplement what government gets in tax collections. So the deficit, in order to fund the domestic consumption, government at times has nothing to do but to borrow in order to cover up that one. This one, the current performance in government, has not been the trend. And I wouldn't want to look at the performance report and imagine that this is what government has been doing. Because when you look at the previous years, when the GDP growth was about 6 to almost 7%, right now, in the last 30 years, GDP growth had never sunk to 3%. And because of this, it has affected areas of the economy. And it is not only Uganda. When you go to the neighbors, when you go to American economy, even when you go to the Chinese, they all have these challenges because of the pandemic. And I believe that once we can revive the productive areas and enable the economy to open up with the vaccination you're talking about when government does it, there is an opportunity for us to rebound and make the economy perform much better. But there are some inherent challenges that have been observed over time. For instance, when you go to the health sector, it is not only a problem of absenteeism. When you look at the human capacity requirements within the health sector and the current slots that have been filled because of the availability of the resources, because of the capping by the Minister of Public Service and Minister of Finance, you can see that there is a very big gap. Right now, there are so many doctors on the streets because they cannot be recruited, yet there are many hospitals and health centers that require doctors, and we cannot absorb them because of the ability or inability to pay those doctors. That one's a huge problem. When you go to the professionals, the consultants, even the regional referral or district referral hospitals, many of them don't have the required number of consultants that are expected. So with the personnel not available to fill the positions that they should, how do you expect the satisfaction rate within the people who go to hospitals.
But
Be
the
satisfied
personnel
when there is
aside,
a problem.
Honorable Dombo, even in some hospitals where the personnel are, you haven't given them the tools to work with. I have visited some hospitals before, maybe now it has changed, where you find even right at the entrance of the operating theater, they have a charcoal stove trying to sterilize equipment because the autoclaving machines died long time ago. You go to the incubators for the babies, they have improvised. Somebody's putting there a charcoal stove under to warm up the babies. I saw it with my own eyes in Kawolo Hospital and in Muvendi and Mitiana at one point. So how is a doctor who has been trained for 6 years in my career going to work in a condition like that when you have not given them the tools? In fact, I have a lot of respect for the health workers of Uganda because they have saved lives even with minimal facilitation from the government that is supposed to do it for them.
There are a number of factors that lead to that type of problem within the health sector and other sectors, including education and could be others. The first one is that the decentralization that was done in the health sector. This has been a very big debate going on in the health sector, asking whether the recruitment of doctors in the district hospitals and other facilities should be centralized in order to enable some distant districts in order to be able to recruit and have the capacity to recruit and retain doctors because of the fat-rich areas. That debate has never been concluded, but it's a live debate that has been going on in the hospitals right from the time of Honorable Malinga. The next one is that we have also been dogged down because of management problems and corruption tendencies within the individuals, who some of whom, either because of capacity issues, some because of management problems, others total inefficiency because they have the resources. Look at many districts. There are districts that return money to the central government and Minister of Finance because they have lacked the capacity to absorb the funds.
So when you observe all those that kind of inefficiency, what do you do as a government?
No, the government has been progressively working. When you see, when they change the permanent secretaries, for instance, at the strategic level, the permanent secretaries have influence over the ministries on the planning, procurement, and recruitment on the staff that are required. So at strategic level, when you go to Kaolo Hospital, for instance, I don't know when you are there last, Kaolo Hospital has been revamped. It has been rehabilitated by
the World Bank loan.
By loan coming from Spain, I think, and a number of hospitals have also been revamped. So even when that was a problem then, it isn't the problem now because it has been addressed.
I know when I visited,
and this has happened.
There was work in progress to try
and this has happened in a number of health facilities. But even when government is trying its best, it is trying its best within the challenges that are available, that are both human capacity, ability to recruit, and also the mindset change of some of our people in the way they carry on their duties when they are called on.
Honorable Emmanuel and Ibrahim, hold on to your points because we're going to take a break. And on the spot, we'll be right back.
Where to find a home in...
Welcome back. You're watching On the Spot. My name is Patrick Amara. My guests tonight are Honorable Emmanuel Dombo and Honorable Semuju Ibrahim Nganda. And we are looking into government performance, and the report that we saw is not showing us a very good picture. Earlier, Honorable Ibrahim, you're talking about maybe the personnel, people in position of responsibility. You seem to suggest that maybe they are lacking in skills. And if that is the case, how do we get the most competent people and then to do the jobs that are required for Uganda?
I was happy when the performance contract was introduced for permanent secretaries. I don't know whether that is where it stopped. Because many of the people who are working in government have no targets to meet. They have given you a job, you can go and sleep. The job is there. My first job was a one-year contract, renewable on performance. So you can imagine, you've left university, given a job, but for 1 year, renewable on performance. That is going to be a driver for you to work hard. I have never, in my career as a journalist and as a politician, seen a reshuffle, whether of RDCs, whether of policemen, of cabinet, that is caused because of the performance. Because this cabinet that you have here, there are people who are shocked by the appointment. I thought the one appointing people, the first thing to do is to meet them, share with them the corrective objective where you want to go and why you think they need to reinforce you. And then you tell them, I am giving you this opportunity and these are your targets. You don't meet them, then but people were shocked. Even me, I've been appointed there. I saw them on NTV here. I was shocked. They appointed me. So if you have been appointed for deliver on no targets, what should be the motivation for you to work? In the media world where I was before, every newsroom had a target. If you are selling newspapers and you don't have the sales, everybody involved must answer. In football, there are targets. If you hire a coach to take Uganda to the Africa Cup of
There are
Nations,
appraisals every quarter.
yes, if you fail, you are in trouble. Government cannot be the only institution where there are no targets and sanctions, and then you want to perform. And I don't know what motivated them to go for an annual review performance. Because you have not assembled the people to perform. You have simply picked them. I was giving you an example. In schools, if I have an inspector of school, I've looked at the performance of government in secondary school, and their target as aligned to the NDP. There are, of course, performance in sciences has dropped, but there are also districts where you never had first grade and their targets for the performance to grow, I'm not sure whether by 12% until then, and then you continue sending salaries, you continue appointing inspectors, until such a time. All those Asian countries have grown partly because starting with the top leadership, to everybody who is given an opportunity to serve, we all have targets. I was reading a report on the most toward the cities, and I think last year, about 2 years ago, it was Tokyo and so on and so forth. But Turkey, Istanbul had been number 7. They said we want now Istanbul to be number 5, the most toward the city. So we want to jump 2 steps. What do we do? What are the others doing? We need to start medical tourism, and government provided money for the private sector to build the state-of-art hospitals to begin attracting more people. So once you have targets as a country, I mean, look at football. We all love here European football. Every year the recruitment is going to be driven because of what they want to achieve. So you don't maintain the set of human resource that you have that made you number 20 out of 20. If the government has underperformed and you go for a review, everybody who has caused that must be sanctioned. You don't get failures, the people who have failed you, and they are the ones reviewing themselves and making slogans next year are going to improve and on and on. And that's the biggest failure of the government that the Honorable Dombo is serving. They have no targets to deliver, and that's why they choose people the way they choose them, even when they fail, because they never expected them in the first instance that they are going to perform. If you are a minister and I have given you a sector, and the sector is not performing, and I've made resources available to you, why should you continue having that job? But sometimes the reshuffle is to move them around. One who has been in energy can now go to roads. One who has been in roads now can go to public service. So that's how they run the country. Okay. Even the medical doctors, we can continue talking about the lack of motivation, the lack of tools, but they should also have a target. Because how comes, I keep asking myself a very simple question. Look at the government schools and look at the private schools, people like Murindo or Chitende. How comes a man like Murindo can set up a school infrastructure? Today, Uganda Cranes is hosted at St. Mary's Playground. This one that was donated to Uganda of Nambole has been run down. The biggest facility that Uganda has donated, it has been run down. It has now become a COVID monument because it was abandoned to COVID patients and so on and so forth. So so if I want to appoint people to help me, do I go and appoint a certain lady or man from somewhere, or I go for those Chitende people and they're the ones that I put in the government? I asked the government yesterday when we were talking about BMK. I saw Makeda and I was very happy when they did that, asking Leti Murwana and Wavamuno to go and teach students in the economic classes. It happens in the US. And that's why I told them yesterday that instead of picking everybody, these ones who carry yoga money on their head that they have gone to get people out of poverty, why don't you pick the BMKs to be the one to conduct those operations? So that failure on part of government is the reason every year there will be an annual review report and they will not be able to meet any target. Then they will go for another, they will do another report, then they will, and now COVID has become the latest catchword. I was looking at the trade performance export vis-a-vis imports. And all the figures for the last 8 years, the performance has been very poor, just made worse by COVID. But the performance has been very poor. Because if Kenya and Tanzania are able to go into the middle income countries and Uganda is unable, do you want to suggest that COVID hit only Uganda? That the reason for us we are underperforming it is because of COVID. It brought many restrictions.
Hold on there. Let me go to the Honorable Emmanuel Dombo. The good thing is that it's government itself that is trying to review, because this is the government annual performance review that is under the office of the Prime Minister. So that's a good thing, because you want to assess yourselves. But when you look at the score, for example, you know, at the bottom of the scorecard is Bugwere with only 5% at the local government, what they have been able to achieve. You have Madiokolo 7%, you have Karenga 10%, you have Abim about, and Kabong 11% of what they're supposed to achieve. When will they even go to 20? When will they even go to 30?
Does the report give the cause?
Of course it does.
What does it say?
You know, the things you have pointed out.
Now is COVID.
You know?
So everything now is COVID.
I
want to tell you that Honorable Sam Uganda has evaluated government through parliament, but he has never had the opportunity to serve in government as either a chief executive or an executive or a minister or even a permanent secretary. If he did, or if he took care in execution of his work as a member of parliament, he should have known that ministries have targets. And even when you look at the documents, the basis for government to plan, first of all, for us in NRM, we have the manifesto which we put. The basic road document that we use before we even go to implementation of government activities is the manifesto, through which we made promises to the people of Uganda, and the progressive execution by ministers is only a rollout of what has been promised through the manifesto. So the manifesto sets target for us through promises. And we say when you raise money, we shall be able to do this. The second one, when you go to the UNDP National Development Plan, it also sets targets on what you want to achieve over a period of time. And every budget cycle sets targets, and these performance reviews for every ministries, they sit and take targets and even compare with the current performance as a basis for doing work. What hasn't happened well is that many sectors are unfunded, are not properly funded. There has also been some haphazard planning, because during the budget review conference in Kololo, one of the observations was, why would a ministry that knows what it's going to do come with a supplementary expenditure 2 days after the budget has just been passed? And it's something that I was also reviewing and saying, but under what circumstances would this happen unless something was real, extraordinary? And when you look at the civil society, these are some of the concerns that have come out. And there has been progressive improvement. When you look at the education sector, for instance, there has been tremendous growth. Even when the UPE has suffered in some of the districts within the country, but there has been astronomical development and growth within the education sector. The number of children going to school, the number of children going into university, the number of universities that have been constructed, and this is a big growth. The biggest challenge now we have as a party and the government is creation of jobs for the young people who have gotten through school. And when you look at these numbers, they have come because of deliberate government investment in the education sector, in the health sector, which enabled these young people not to die, and they have grown up because they were immunized, because there is good health. Even when these, amidst all these challenges, government has tried its best. And I want to tell you that over time, you are going to see Uganda leaping. Because when you look at the UNDP, the National Development Plan, one of the current targets is to ensure that the GDP
what is the
growth.
quality of the education you're giving us? Yes, you have given us many universities and secondary schools and all that, but what is the quality that we're getting? Because I see when you know, students are getting out of university, I hear things of retooling. When I see when they're entering, I hear things of pre-entry exams, and yet somebody has even scored with the AAA. What does that tell you?
The problem is not the quality. The problem is mismatch of the qualifications that the children are getting with the current labor requirements within the market. When you are with the technicians and the investors, and you hear the type of people they would want to recruit, and you find what the universities are producing, there is a mismatch. And this is something that must be deliberately addressed so that it does not need to retooling a child who has graduated with psychology and history in order to teach him how to bake or how to do welding, because that is something that is demanded within the labor sector. There has been a mismatch, and this is something that is seriously acknowledged. The second one,
so is that sometimes when you come to a platform like this and you actually admit things like this, mismatch, inefficiency and stuff like that, and I want to agree what you have been able to point out, do other people get it?
They do. You know that perhaps the only challenge, the president, perhaps he hasn't been as forceful as he, because changing society, you don't need like he did in Uruwe. In Uruwe, when he wanted to change government, he picked a gun. He went and fought and overthrew a government, and he came and established the status quo. But in order to change the minds of the people, when you look backwards and see when the Mbarara University was being formed, why was it called Mbarara University of Science and Technology? And he deliberately told the people of Mbarara and other universities to say, right now the driver of change, the driver of entrepreneurship is science. Let us invest in science, let us get more scientists, let us reward them and pay them better, because science are the innovators. Many universities have hidden, and the number of them are doing it. But also many universities have come up, and for them the desire is recruitment of the number of children, their ability to raise fees so that they can raise income in order to sustain their activities, when what they are training the children is not what is being required by the labor market. This is something that must progressively be addressed, and hopefully a drastic decision taken so that we don't require retooling children who have already been given enough education and have spent money and time training when they cannot put their skills they have trained for and need retooling in order for them to be productive.
You know, you've tried as much as possible to build the infrastructure. I know you borrowed money to build dams. But Honorable Emmanuel Dombo, the money we're paying for electricity tariff is so high. And you wonder at that level whether people are going to use it to be able to have businesses, you know, enterprises that can make money for them. And we seem to be locked in because of the concessions we made with the companies that have invested in there. So do you understand? We are now saying that we even have, you know, surplus electricity generation. But even with that surplus, when it is redundant, Ugandans are paying through the nose.
You know, I don't know how I'll translate it, but in my tradition, we have a saying, or a proverb, which says when you are weak and you have a luggage on the head, and time comes when you want to ease yourself, if there is nobody who will assist you, if you put the luggage down, you may have to ease yourself with the luggage on the head. This is the challenge that Uganda has gotten through, because at the time many of these policies were pushed down its throat. It's not because Uganda could afford it, because I remember I was in Parliament when UEB was disbanded, and it was a very big debate as to why, from one company called UEB, we had to break it down in order to create 3 companies. We had to create generation, we had to create transmission and distribution. And each of these companies now got a managing director, and their overheads became big, and all these progressively were absorbed within the tariff that we are paying now. And when the concession was given to Umeme, there were a number of things also that weren't done. Recently, you heard when the president was complaining. Because at that time, when you were arguing, I thought there was a lot of insurgency within the country and so many things happening that could be the president didn't know the negotiations that were taking place, that actually Umeme and its agreements that they agreed to, the terms were not favorable for the people of Uganda, and now they are making us to pay very expensively. So progressively.
So who is that?
So progressively.
Who is that negotiating terms not favorable for the people of Uganda? And are you a Ugandan? You're negotiating for who? Why are you doing it in our name when it's not for us?
The question would be, what was the motivation? Because that's something that many people have been asking. It's not only in Umeme. Even when you look at a number of loans that we have negotiated loans from the World Bank. When you look at the terms of the loans, of some of the loans that we have procured, you find that some countries procured the same loans at different terms. When we asked the World Bank representative in Uganda, when I was still in Parliament, he said that's what your people negotiate for. But a number of countries negotiate could be even better than what was happening. This is a challenge, and it creates one problem, whether the people doing it are patriotic enough to know that they are doing this in favor of...
Is it an issue of patriotism, or there's something in it for them?
No, it may be lack of patriotism. Because under what circumstances,
and you lock us into a certain concession to pay money for long term. That is so exorbitant.
Unless there is a motivation of corruption, because that would be a question somebody would be asking. But the options are available. I don't know what the terms of the agreement say. Some of these agreements may require a buyout. So that at one time there was a Salim Saleh report which made a recommendation that in order to control the prices of an energy, you know, when you look at the millers, there are some of the industrialists who pay the rates of the almost domestic consumers. And somebody, in order to mill a circle at one time, in order to mill a bag of posho, you have to use another bag of maize. You had to use another bag of maize in order to pay for the tariff, in order to mill another bag. And this is the example the millers, when they made members of parliament, they were expressing. But progressively, when the economy improves, I think what government may have to do is to totally buy out the concession in the long run, in order to ensure that they can be in charge of the electricity. Recently, the president gave a directive, and he said the power which you are procuring for the industrialization in Uganda should not be transmitted through Meme. And I'm sure Parliament has been doing the necessary legal framework in order to facilitate that change. But still, I know there is going to be a cost, because it was not anticipated at the time the concession was being negotiated, and this may still create a cost on the budget of Uganda. But many people took advantage. Either they were ignorant, or they took advantage because of the transition that was happening, because of the privatization and liberalization of government sectors, and they negotiated very unfavorable terms that have cost the people of Uganda what is happening now.
I hope you know that in one major region of our country, actually, they are not even on the national grid.
That's West Nile and Northern Uganda?
That's West Nile.
West Nile.
And for them, there is somebody else who's providing power, which is on and off. There's a local word they use there, because it's on and off, then they call it nyanyu. We're going to
But the government is about to overcome that problem, because with once Karuma Dam is finished and Nyagak, is it Nyagak? And a number of those small hydropower stations, soon West Nile is going to be fully on board, and industrialization is going to be high in those areas.
We're going to take a break, and when we come back, I'll open the line so that you too can be a part of this discussion. You're going to see the numbers on the screen. You can call us and maybe have a question or a comment that you have. But in case you disagree with any of the panelists here, that's okay. Just disagree with respect. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching On the Spot. My name is Patrick Amara. My guests tonight are Honorable Emmanuel Dombo and Honorable Ibrahim Semojunganda. This is the moment when you get to tell us what you think. We are opening our line so that you can be a part of this discussion. You're going to see the numbers on the screen. Pick your phone and tell us what you think about the performance of government in areas of health, education. We could even add security, because we have seen a problem in Masaka in the recent times. There's one thing maybe we should be happy about, especially for you. I'm sure you're frequent flyers, that Uganda Airlines now is flying across continents, because just this week I think they went to Dubai. Though my problem is, I wonder whether you have been able to make a lot of, prepare the people there to come, as opposed to the plane taking Ugandans there to go and spend the little money that we have, because it would be better to bring them here, spend money in our economy, than us taking our dollars and burning it in London and Dubai.
No, the seats are created to carry people to and from.
True.
And
even when they come here, they have to go back.
They have to go back.
Yes.
So
that's it.
Either trip, they must make economies and balance because of the traffic that they have. But I know, this being the maiden flight, we have still a lot to do in order to create regularity, to build custom, and then connectivity of the planes. I don't know which planes, which partnerships that we have, the Uganda Airlines has entered into with on the other side, because unless you are carrying people whose final destination is Dubai or London, but you may need onward connecting passengers, and this can only happen in the world where people are building so many networks. It is unfortunate that we're beginning when the pandemic has already hit the travel industry, and many planes that should have been in the skies are parked in the deserts for lack of space where to park the planes because of the pandemic. But progressively, I think the tourism sector is rebounding. Let us do the investment and the advertisement. We want to congratulate the people of Uganda. I want to tell you, when I was in Parliament, there was nothing so disturbing, and at one time we were insulted by somebody from an airline I will not mention, when one of our members of Parliament complained at the airport as to why they had cancelled and were being delayed. And the man came and politely said, if things were that easy, Ugandan Airlines would be flying. And we all kept quiet, because we had tried and failed. But now that we're in the skies, let us try as much as possible. These stories we have been reading in the papers, I'm yet to find out what exactly happened. But it was so saddening that Uganda Airlines had just started, and no sooner the same challenges of corruption, which made us to wind up last time, started resurfacing again. But I hear it was nipped in the bud before it became pandemic. Let me hope that the current management that has taken over the affairs of Uganda Airlines will do us proud and keep us in the air, so that the children and people of Uganda will be proud in traveling and flying the cranes.
The truth is that if you look at other airlines on the continent, the truth is Uganda Airlines may not make money for a long time. So, Ibrahim, how do they ensure there's not much hemorrhage of resources going into an investment that may not make money? Because if you look, Kenya Airways is struggling, South African Airways is struggling, Egyptian Air, Rwanda Air, maybe only Ethiopian Airlines on the continent that is able to make some money. Others are not. How do we ensure that we just don't keep putting their money? At the end of the day, we can recoup something and get a return on the investment.
I think the benefit of the airline is not necessarily the amount of money that the company will make at the end of the financial year. But it is other benefits, and that's why the Kenyan Airways, with all its problems, you will see government helping it. I don't know if they have now taken it over, because there was a proposal to take it over. Entebbe Airport, which is our main entry into Uganda through air, I think has a traffic that has averaged about 1.8 million people every year. And they're all brought in by different airlines. Even when I was in the media, I remember one time we wanted to host an East African Editors Forum in Kampala, but because of the travel-related problems, the other editors refused. They said, no, would rather go to Kenya, because I don't want to come from Morocco. I have to take Emirates, go to another 3 capitals before I reach Uganda.
Sometimes even get out of the continent.
Yeah, so in terms of investment, in terms of convenience, I think an airline, I am one of those who supported the idea of reviving Uganda Airline. There are benefits in terms of tourism, in terms of trade. The only trouble you have, it remains the traffic who comes, because you must advertise a lot to attract people to come to Uganda, the services, because now the airline industry is very competitive, extremely competitive. You must have advantage over others if you're not very competitive in terms of comfort. But I support Uganda having an airline, if not for many other reasons, at least for sentimental reasons. But I know it can work with minimal support. The only problem are the structural problems that we have been talking about. The same motivation that make you choose people on the street to become ministers will make you choose people to go and work in an airline even when they have no capacity or they have no integrity. And that's what is dogging many of the government investments in Uganda, that you don't choose the right human resource for it. The excitement when it came, I actually thought that they had done some serious work. But as they usually do, 3-4 months down the road, they come making noise themselves that there is a problem in the airline, as if they didn't know it would be there. So the management and the supervision in Uganda is still a very big problem. The other day we were with the standard gauge railway, which had become a new catchword. Now they have remembered the old Uganda railways, which had been vandalized. It's land sold by government, where you had the relatives of those who are in power. They are the ones who are heading land committee, and they sold all the land of Uganda. Now they need the land. Having sold it now, their committees to look for the land to revive the Uganda. I don't know. You
can buy from themselves.
I sympathize with who are serving in this government like a dog. The way they do things, you vandalize a government company and the following day, because even the Uganda airline itself was vandalized. Dombo, you did the report. I still have a copy of the privatization sector.
I have it too.
in the parliament. That Uganda airline was one of the companies that you captured in your own report on privatization, and deliberately vandalized. Then the later came, because you see, if Uganda airline was still ground handling at Entebbe and retained some of the businesses, even when it doesn't make money through sale of tickets and flying people, there will be some other
It can be like as an infrastructure.
Yes.
As an enabler.
But the trouble, it was vandalized. Then they said, but this is a good idea. Wait, okay, we can revive it. Uganda, oh, we made a mistake. Now let us revive it. Oh, UEB, we made a mistake. Let's now, I don't know.
Merge. Okay. It looks like we're having a challenge, according to our producer, getting some people. But also the time is out now. So, gentlemen, I'm going to ask you to make your parting shots, beginning with you, Honorable Emmanuel Dombo.
Well, I want to thank our viewers for giving in time to watch, because I've been seeing here on social media and their responses and the questions and their concerns, some of the concerns. Uganda belongs to all of us, and we have a responsibility, even when amidst the hardest of the hard things that may happen. We have a duty, we have an obligation, especially those in government and the members of parliament. Even when he's in the opposition, he's a member of government.
No.
Because, you know...
there is a difference between the state of Uganda and government. There is a very big
yes,
difference.
because there are 3 arms of government. That's what I was told. and Parliament is one arm where he belongs. So if I was taught wrongly, then perhaps that's the wrong thing that happened. But I wonder,
I will help you.
But why they are paid the salary by government is because they're part of government. Try to help us.
I am paid the salary by taxpayers.
No, government was given the responsibility to collect the tax and to levy the tax to the people of Uganda, and that's the government.
That's how you misuse money,
that is,
because you think it is your money.
No, it's not.
This money is for taxpayers. Even the government
it's for government. It's for government. Government has the responsibility. Even
government itself is paid.
And it is the only one which is allowed under the law.
It is just a company running Uganda.
No, it's not a company, but that's what the law says.
We are all paid by Uganda. Even the government is paid.
That's what the law says, because government...
All right, one at a time.
So, it's our duty and responsibility to ensure that even when the challenges become tough, that we try as much as possible to do what we are supposed to do. Two, the Secretary General of NRM, during the budget conference, did raise something and said that government must ensure that work as much as possible to fight the pandemic of corruption. Because most of the time when us, the party bureaucrats, go to the ground, one of the cries that is very obvious is the pandemic of corruption, which has affected service delivery. And government has made the commitment that it is not going to tolerate corruption, and it will do as much as possible to fund the corruption-fighting agencies to ensure that the people of Uganda should receive the services that they require.
All right.
Let me hope that Parliament is going to join us, irrespective of what was in the papers recently, that actually Parliament, which we thought was going to be the lead protector, that at times gets compromised, but the Speaker of Parliament has made a commitment, which I read in the papers, to say they are going to conduct their own investigations and ensure that redress is fixed, if at all it is true.
All right. Ibrahim, your parting shot.
I had an opportunity to appear with the president on a talk show, and I told him the day he became the project is the day we lost it. I think there is a lot of effort goes into power retention, and that's why the response when the power is challenged is instant, is immediate, is robust. If the response is on COVID, they will tell you the vaccines are not easy, Uganda is not a market, but when you wanted to buy fighter jets...
Do you know how he defends his constituency?
Even the...
When he's challenged?
Even the processes of accessing...
Double barrel. Lightning speed.
Even the processes of processing money were not followed because we had to go and buy jets. I don't know, I keep inviting people on government. There are things that we can do together to make life better in Uganda. Say that it's not a matter of life and death.
Okay.
I don't see them embracing that. So you will have their full energy when the power is challenged. But if vaccines are not here, they will blame each other, they will blame corruption. So the government performance report is an indicator, and I am happy. They only haven't published it. Maybe having admitted that there is a failure almost on all the targets, that's when you want to see heads rolling, people being sanctioned for failure. And it is until I have seen that I will convince myself we are back on track. But otherwise, when you continue assembling a set of human, it's like a football. So you are hit 20 goals, and then the following day you change the jersey, thinking that maybe this time you lost because of this. So the motivation, I don't see the motivation. I see a lot of rhetoric. So I am not one of those who are going to think that anything is about to change. It's going to be the same thing.
All right. Honorable Emmanuel Dombo and Honorable Ibrahim Semujunganda, I want to thank you so much, gentlemen, for your time, but most importantly, I want to thank you, appreciate your insights. And for those who have been watching this program, I also want to thank you for your great company. One thing that I've just learned from the discussion here is that if we're going to change things at the district level, in our villages, wherever we are, we need some kind of civic competence where Ugandans who know their rights and know their responsibilities are going to demand for better. The Ugandans are going to be bold, Ugandans are going to be assertive, and demand what is theirs, but also know that those rights will come with responsibilities. Good night, and God bless Uganda.